Hello. Thank you so much for having me here. I, as was just mentioned, am a futurist and immersive technologist. I work primarily in augmented and virtual reality. I have two main drivers. One, I want to democratize knowledge and information. The other, I want to break apart this brain-body binary that we inherited from our Greco-Roman ancestors and put us back in our bodies. What do I mean by that? Democratize knowledge and information. I grew up in a small town in West Texas, 4 hours from the nearest airport or mall, so small it is literally classified as frontier and does not have a stoplight. Today, I consult with Fortune 500 companies around the globe to help them bring the future of immersive computing into their business units. I am a VR/AR faculty member at a think tank in Silicon Valley, Singularity University. I've been an executive in San Francisco, bringing the new design paradigms of VR and AR to market. And I have helped to lead design thinking transformation globally for IBM. I know how hard that journey was. And I think our world will be a much better place if we can democratize access for more people. So I do my part to democratize information and knowledge. Bust apart the brain-body binary. What do I mean by that? I was a dancer and choreographer for a decade before coming into my crazy tech life. I believe deeply in putting people into their bodies. I believe we learn best when we're in our bodies. I believe that we can actually collaborate most effectively when we have embodied interactive ways of sharing information and knowledge. And so I work in this technology because I believe that is what's going to make that possible at scale. But enough about me. I want to know about you guys. Real quick, raise your hand if you work in healthcare, anything that touches healthcare. Raise your hand if you work in manufacturing. Raise your hand if you do anything with the military. Raise your hand if you work in entertainment or sports in any way. Raise your hand if you are doing software support for some company in any of these domains. OK. So all of these fields are going to be disrupted by this technology. Has anyone tried virtual reality? Who's tried it? Raise your hand. OK, so I'd say about half of us. Who's tried augmented reality? Maybe the HoloLens? A few less, maybe a third to a quarter. Those of you who've tried it, I want you to vote. If you loved it, raise the roof. If you hated it, your hands stay down. If you weren't quite sure, it's right here. Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3, vote. All right, so we have some believers. We have some people who are not so sure. You have good reason to be not so sure. Why? It's expensive. The technology is still getting small enough to be portable and useful. You look kind of like an idiot when you wear those things on your face. There are a lot of reasons why we have not yet seen mass consumer adoption, but we're going to discuss what that future is going to look like. So if you guys have questions, you can ping me on my Twitter handle at any point. I'll get back to you, I promise. I want us to talk about why this technology is regularly cited as a top 10 trend in every analyst report, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Deloitte. I want us to talk about why every leading technology company is vying for technological leadership in this domain. Google, Facebook, Intel, Microsoft, Adobe. What is this about? What makes this technology so potentially disruptive, so potentially valuable? And why should you care to deploy this tech? What kind of problems can it help you solve? I want us to start with the human side. I'm going to take you in this talk through a why, a how, and a what. We're going to get down into nitty-gritty use cases at the end. But first, we're going to talk about why this matters for people. What problems can we solve? Because this technology is going to be the immersive technology platform of our future. It's going to be the connective tissue of AI, robotics, all of these other technologies that you are charged to bring to your enterprises. So the first big value add is the ability to harness attention with augmented and virtual reality. We live in a world where we are swimming in a hyper-connected sea of data, and we know that power is very connected to your ability to access, deploy, model, and digest this information. So how do we navigate this hyper-connected ocean of data in the best possible way? Here's a quick history of how we've ingested information thus far. So it starts here on your left, the savanna of our ancestors. Everything is deeply physical, spacious. Then we move to the storefront of our grandparents' time. More compact, still physicalized. Now we move to the GUI of today. where every physical object can be abstracted, demonetized, democratized, digitized, and put in our phone. Alarm clock, it's in our phone. Calendar, it's in our phone. You guys remember when these were concrete objects, I know. So what happens when we do this? As information density increases, multitasking increases. New interaction paradigms have to be learned, which of course increases cognitive load. What does this mean for your daily experience? Information overload, right? Yeah, I see nodding heads. OK, so how do you manage that? What is scarce in a world where information is rich? American Nobel Prize-winning economist, sociologist, and computer scientist Herbert Simon predicted this. A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. What you all are so generously giving me right now is your most important resource. It is also your business's most important resource, because it's your talent's ability to have impact. If you do nothing else, if you take nothing else away from this talk, please recognize your attention is your scarcest and most valuable resource. Use it wisely. So in a time when we've abstracted so much of life and been inundated with information, wouldn't it be nice if we had a technology well-suited to create a sense of physical presence and full immersive attention? We're going to see examples of that. The second big impact of this tech is that it revolutionizes the way we train and learn. Have you ever noticed that the half-life of skills seems to be diminishing in this future of work time, where educational systems are actually having a hard time adjusting to the current work ecosystem, and even training your employees onto new technology quickly enough can actually be a challenge? Cognitive psychologists are now catching up to what dancers have always known, that cognitive ecology is defined through and by the body. Knowledge exists in mind-body world systems. What does that mean? That means that we use our bodies and our physical environment to offload information and storage. If anyone has ever crossed their fingers to remember something, maybe to remember two things, you are using your body to offload storage. Cognition is also inactive, meaning that thought is shaped by our interactions, not just by the way we inhabit our bodies. For example, if any of you are holding a warm cup right now, like this guy's probably holding a warm cup, you're more likely to be friendly if you're holding a warm cup than if you're holding a cold cup. That is how much impact your body has on shaping your thoughts. Convicts are more likely to be acquitted after lunch when their judge's blood sugar is higher than before lunch. This is real. Talk about big data and encoded bias. We're going to have to start tracking these things, right? So anyway, our bodies shape the way that we learn, the way that we think in massive ways. But this isn't new. Dancers have known this for ages. That's why we mark when we're doing choreography. We move through space to literally encode information. And education has known this for a while as well. This is the cone of learning that Edgar Dale created in the early 1900s. Maria Montessori did something very similar, if you're familiar with embodied education through Montessori. Notice this. After 2 weeks, we tend to remember 10% of what we read and 20% of what we hear, whereas we remember 90% of what we say and do. How strange that our education system is based on the former. What if it were to look something more like this? I've worked with the National Head Start Association to bring augmented reality into early childhood education classrooms for this purpose, because it exponentially increases the rate at which young children learn. But it's not just young children. Numerous studies have been done that show if you are interacting, you retain 40 to 60% more information, you learn more quickly, and it doesn't work if you're just looking at the reality. If you're looking at a video, for example. Let's say you put on a VR headset. Columbia University did a study. If you're observing the manipulation of a structure in virtual reality, not a big difference. But if you actually are using inactive cognition, interacting with that information and knowledge, massive increase in the amount that we retain and the speed at which we learn. Have any of you ever tried to renovate a home before? What do you use when you're trying to figure out how to do the thing that you need to do? What do you use? YouTube, says everyone. Yes, Lowe's knows that. So they decided to do a study to compare YouTube versus VR. They saw a 40% increase in learning measured on people's ability to recall the steps. They also had a really cool, interesting marketing opportunity here. But that's a little bit gimmicky. I want us to stay focused on the actual value add. The third big value add, touching new worlds.
You'll be able to pick it up.
Got it.
Turn it around, bring it closer to you, take it farther away, and in the end, you can make it come to life.
This is the British Museum. I saw this at South by. It's one of my favorite interactive pieces. It allows you to touch objects you would never otherwise have the opportunity to touch and understand them contextually in a way that you would never be able to understand them. Because a bone, which you would never be able to touch because it's a rare object, can literally become the creature that it used to be. What an amazing way to learn. Here's the other big thing, guys. The history of great ideas isn't a history of ideas. It's a history of representations of ideas. What does that mean? That means that every idea is actually created through a form that scales. You, sir, can have the best idea of anyone the rest of this conference. If you can't tell it to him, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to share and scale your idea. William Playfair, the man who created this, is one of my favorite examples. He was writing a book on trade between Great Britain and other countries, and the way that data was represented them was columns of numbers. He decided, what if I conflate the map with columns of numbers? And instead of right and left being east and west, it would be high numbers and low numbers. He gave birth to the data plot. Where do we use the data plot? What about all of mathematics, all of engineering? He revolutionized science because he found a new way to represent information and knowledge. And every representation needs a medium to live inside, like music or print, which we went all in on. The printing press revolutionized access to information and knowledge. Powerful. But mediums empower us, and they also disempower us. We are still working with this print-based paradigm today. Look familiar? There are beautiful things about this, but they are relegating us to understanding the world in a very minute array. Our body has been equipped by evolution to make sense of information and knowledge in myriad ways. We are not leveraging the majority of them. For example, you can understand music many ways. You can understand it through your ears, through oral experience, spatially, like an orchestra represented in a symphony, tactilely, playing the piano or guitar, visually, the representation of musical notes, kinesthetically, with your body. All of these ways are ways that we understand music. The more of them that you combine, the more deeply you can understand something, the more quickly you can understand something. We try to do this now by bringing design thinking into our companies, right? You're laughing because you know about this. What if with VR you could place people inside a new experience and show them macular degeneration, for example? Or equip entire workforces to be more productive. Cybersecurity is something that is actually quite difficult to train. We just heard a bit about this. You need to be proficient in Python scripts, navigating log files, understanding forensic analysis. What if it were gamified and it became a spatial experiment? This is an actual, real offering that is produced by a company in Colorado called ProtectWise, where a cybersecurity specialist can navigate their entire infrastructure as a game. So why does this matter? Harness attention, revolutionize learning, and touch new worlds. When is this going to happen? It's a $107 billion industry, according to Goldman Sachs, by the year 2025. I think it's going to be bigger than that. Why now? The ubiquity and quality of mobile devices, essentially powering these experiences. VR is the majority of the ecosystem now, with smartphones as the brain. But this technology is evolving. The cost is going down, and the technology quality is going up, resolving issues like nausea and form factor. Cell phones used to be like briefcases. VR and AR are in a similar phrase right now. This is why, by the way, Unity can raise $400 million in its 2017 private equity round. In fact, they received 3 times the amount of term sheets that they wanted, because this is the operating system of the future. They are the OS of the future, game engines. And if you aren't starting to think about this, your industry is not going to be able to keep up with these new ways of operating. Here is Intel's form factor. Very nice, looks exactly like a pair of glasses. You don't feel like an idiot when you wear it. So here's an example of augmented reality versus virtual reality. Notice that while virtual reality is 90% of the market now, augmented reality will increasingly capture the market and disrupt multiple market ecosystems. Pokemon Go, for example, disrupting all kinds of places. This is Torchy's Tacos that had a 16x increase in its sales because of Pokemon Go users. Or, for example, Second Life, which creates an entire economy for people in a digital world right now. People have made the cover of Business Week because they've become millionaires through selling actual virtual world. The Second Life economy in 2016 was $500 million. Anyone know about this? Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One? This stuff is happening. It's becoming mainstream. And technology adoption is increasing in its rate of acceleration. Look at this curve on the far right. Adoption is changing, and you all are heralding that process. You are the keepers of that transition. So how do we deal with this? There are two paths to innovation. There's linear, incremental, and then there's exponential. Quick lesson, incremental. 30 steps, linear steps. If I were to take 30 exponential steps, how far would I go? Guess. 26 times around the Earth. We are not equipped to think in this way, but this is the world that we live in. So how do you function in a world like this? How do you know if you are behind the curve, if you're failing, or if you're investing in the right thing? If you're investing in these exponential technologies, you often ask this question, why the slow start? The trough of disillusionment after the hype cycle, which VR and AR are recently coming out of. Then, will it ever catch up? When is this going to happen? Finally, which path are we on? How do we know that we're actually on the exponential curve? And then chaos and amazement, the massive, sharp increase in the hockey stick growth. This is what technological advancement looks like these days. So in order to lead, you need vision and courage, you need patience and unlearning, and you need to empower and connect. And this is an entire talk that we could give about networked systems. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. So this is the next computing paradigm. VR reigns now, AR is next. We'll have exponential use cases for AR as the technology proliferates, and VR too. So I'm going to run through some really quick use cases because we're super short on time. The total addressable market is actually about the problems you can solve. It's a tool. What can you use to not make this mistake? Please don't make this mistake. The gimmick is an issue, guys. Let's get past the gimmick. I want you to remember delta. You want to create change. I want you to do it through design. This is a phone app you can download right now that allows you to create spatialized representations. Here are architects working with meta technology in 3D space to collaborate. This is a cave automation system that I was in a few weeks ago at Rolls-Royce, where they've actually been able to reduce their design times from a week to 2 hours by getting everyone into this cave system. Here is designing a space in a virtual world. You can even design things like molecules, pharmaceutical design, and partner with AI to run all the possible ligand connections. Expertise in education, Delta. Bringing in knowledge on how to put together an IKEA desk or a very complex piece of machinery, scaling that out to your team. Especially if they are remote and in the field and you have a hands-free application where you can actually bring an expert in to help you in real time. Logistics. This is huge. DHL is already applying augmented reality to logistics. GE saw a 64% decrease in time when they implemented Google Glass. This is also useful for disaster relief, for example, where you actually need to come in with an augmented reality headset to understand the infrastructure of the space. The try before you buy experience, all over the place right now. You can also download this on your phone. IKEA is allowing you, partnering with Apple, to try things out in your home. This is the early consumer adopter marketplace. Recruitment, this is another interesting form of try before you buy. The British Army saw a 66% increase in signups when they gave people immersive experiences. Siemens and Autodesk offered a personalized experience. We're going to skip it for now. And then analytics tools. This is huge. What would it be like to be able to represent data, complex data, visually? and have cross-team collaboration, remote and present, because this technology totally destroys geographic distance. Here's another interesting 3D representation from Virtualytics. You can actually have more dimensions in space and time. And you really need to try this out to understand how different it is. And tomorrow in the Demo Dome, you guys can try some of those things. But why VR specifically? I always like to touch on VR because people are like, AR is awesome, but VR, it's glorified filming and gaming. There are real use cases here. How do you make it more than a roll of the dice to implement this technology? Remember delta and dice, guys. So the dangerous, great use case for VR. Tomorrow in the Demo Dome, you can try walking on a ledge in VR. I want you to try it and see what it's going to be like, OK? But this is really, really practically useful. Think about training for interactive health and safety for an oil and gas company, which is what this is, mocked up in Unreal Game Engine. The impossible. This is superpowers to the people, every little kid's favorite thing, and all of you, because we were all little kids at one point. Imagine being able to show your child the movement of nutrients in a tree. Imagine being able to go with them inside a Dali painting. The counterproductive. This is fascinating. You can change people's race and gender through body transfer in VR. You can also have them do things like cut down trees, mock up a beautiful forest. Stanford Virtual Reality Lab did this. Have a machine, or what is it? Thank you, chainsaw. I love my audience for this reason. Have a chainsaw. What do people do when they see a chainsaw in a forest? They cut down the trees. People use less paper after they do this. You don't tell them to, they just do. It would never make sense to make someone cut down a forest to use less paper. But in VR, you can do the counterproductive. And the expensive, valuable in so many domains. So taking children on a field trip, for example, to see with their bodies how big a building is. This is the Google Cardboard, which is $15, major increase in access for a ton of people. Or being able to bring people into a game without the expensive ticket. 360 VR is making this possible. This could be getting frontline tickets at a fashion show, or going underwater and scuba diving. But you cannot think about this technology without talking about safety and ethics. Research on the impact of VR and AR on brain development in kids is huge, really important. We haven't done a bunch on this yet. And then standards around digital rights, because there has never been a technology more capable of sucking up all of your data. It'll know where your head is, positional tracking, eye tracking, especially when you're projecting light into the retina for augmented reality. It'll know your interaction paradigms. Think of user experience research for immersive worlds. It will know so much about you. And so what does that mean for security? What does that mean in terms of the way we leverage this information? What happens when we add in AI? How do we combat encoded bias so we don't do things like release a Google Pixel phone that recognizes black people as gorillas? That is ridiculous. We have to start thinking now so that we can build good products that serve our societies and make our societies better. So recap, the early VR AR use cases are design, expertise, try before you buy, and data capture. Remember DICE, and don't forget safety and ethics. OK, to finish, I can't put you all in a VR headset. I wish I could. Go to the Demo Dome tomorrow. You can try Ventana for holograms. You can try the Ledge. But in the absence of that, I'm going to try to simulate the difference between immersive learning and the way that we currently share information and knowledge. The difference between now and the future of work. So this is one of my all-time favorite quotes. Anyone know who it's by? Oh, come on, one of the best futurists of all time. Buckminster Fuller. If you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to explain it to them. Give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. That's what I think this technology is. But I'm going to demonstrate it with a self-portrait. Here you guys are, right there. That's you. This is Earthrise, taken by the Apollo 8 astronauts in 1968. Here's another representation of you. You saw this earlier in one of the talks. You've probably seen it in your textbooks as a child. The Solar System Habitable Zone from the American Museum of Natural History in 2000. Here's what's really going on. Reality is spiral-orbital. All terrestrial critical path developments inherently orbit the sun. No path can be linear. All paths are precessionally modulated by remotely operative forces, producing spiralinear paths. Makes perfect sense, right? Yeah, you all got that. What do I mean? This is you. And the difference between what I just read and what you're viewing is the difference that new representations of knowledge can have on the way we share information, the way we model and deploy information, the way your children will learn, the way your workplaces can scale access to information and knowledge, even remotely. And so the question for you all is, how are you going to have that vision and courage to actually try to implement these things, to create the future? So what I would urge you all to do is to embrace that gray area between pragmatism and imagination. Because being an optimist without skepticism makes you naive. But being a skeptic without optimism makes you a cynic. So how do we balance those things? And help us all evolve in the way that we are able to perceive and understand not only our work, but also the world and each other. Thank you.